Hillary. Okay,
Hi.
I'm so excited to talk to you today because you're the hormone expert. I wanted to think about the diets we should be eating, so I went through the research on what we know about, and I just do not like that word perimenopausal, but about women in their 40s and 50s and what they should be eating is what I want to talk about. So, what is menopause? Is age 52? Is that the real age that we've established?
Well, it's the average age is 52. It's not about an age. It's diagnosed a year once you've not had a cycle for 1 year. So when a woman loses her menstrual cycle for a year, and it's really different for every women. Some women will lose it right away, quickly, and often that follows a stressful event. And so menopause can happen to women in their 30s. It's not age related. It can happen to a woman who has a death in her family, goes through a divorce, whatever, has a stressful event and loses her period, and she can be in early menopause. So menopause is not an age, but on average for an American woman, it's around 52. And the perimenopausal period is 10 years typically before that. So there's a ton of hormone shifts happening even before, way before. I mean, the whole game is actually before the actual menopause. By the time you get to the menopause, women sometimes have been through the hard stuff. It's all that chunk before where people have sleep issues, anxiety, weight coming to their middle, their butt and their thighs and their tummy, like weight distribution changes, sometimes painful sex, sometimes dry vagina, sometimes night sweats, sometimes hot flashes. It's a very variable symptom pattern. And fortunately, in medicine's waking up to it. There's been New York Times articles. People are really out on Instagram and screaming about it, in women's forums. But really, typically, many women were just told, like, okay, you might need an antidepressant because they show up with the more anxiety or sleep issues, or you might need a whatever. And we're not recognizing that this chunk of hormone change, these years of hormone change, that's so individualistic depending on the woman's history, the woman's hormone setup, and her current, like, what's happening in her life. And over 10 years, like, her life's going to change, right? So it's just a very complex thing. But the one thing that women are doing the whole time through it is eating. So we should talk about what they should be eating.
Definitely. And I think it's really interesting that it's 4 years before actual menopause, which the average is 52 or whatever. So 4 years before that is when you have the most symptoms, actually. So maybe your period hasn't changed. Maybe you're not noticing any of that. So you're not thinking, oh, this might be some hormonal change going on, causing my migraines, causing my joint pain, causing my bloating. Bloating is one of the biggest symptoms. And if it's before 45 and you had a surgical reason that you stopped having a period and went into early menopause, if it's before 45, we have a lot of things we can do with diet to really help you to prevent problems coming later too. So the earlier this all starts, we want to get on top of it. And I just see that the earlier symptoms and the earlier issues are people's stressful lives. It really is true, right?
Speaking about hot flashes, my daughter left the fire going, and I'm literally dying.
Okay, you get that off. Okay, but looking at the dietary advice, it's so interesting because you and I do a lot of work with fertility and fertility patients. And turns out we're just in this longevity thing for ourselves. So that's where we are today, because we just happen to be in this age group, and what we're talking about today. So it's really pertinent for our own lives for us to figure out how we should be eating, how we should be living. But in the fertility work, it really does mirror stuff that helps you get pregnant and have a happy, healthy baby. That dietary advice is very much the same that we would give to a woman in their 40s and 50s. Like, it really is very similar with a few little exceptions. So that's so cool. Like, so there are these fundamental rules that we can share with you all.
It's just not rocket science. And it always comes back to eating whole foods.
Mhm.
And you're going to see in the research that women who eat high processed foods, a high sugar diet, are going to have more hormonal symptoms than a woman who is eating a lot of food. Now, I'm also going to argue that women who have eating disordered patterns and have anorexia or a low body mass, it's going to show up in a way that's not awesome in menopause, because the thinner we get, and when we start to lose some of our density, some of our juiciness, it's gonna show up like heat in the body. And so this is really a time to leave the restrictive eating patterns of your past, or whatever you were told in the 80s and 90s about not eating, really restricting your calories. That was the dietary advice that doctors used to give. And if any doctor is telling you that right now, that is not fair. You are not having weight changes because you're not eating enough. This is a hormonal dance. It's a complex hormonal dance that has to do with your thyroid, your adrenal glands, which make your stress hormones, your ovaries, your brain health. And it's a complicated cycle that's in charge of your weight and your symptoms, your hormone balance as it changes. So please, 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 if you go to the doctor and they're telling you literal advice from the 80s, like stop what you're doing. Or I had a patient on Thursday that reported that her doctor, and bless her, I'm never against doctors. All doctors, I think, are really working their best in a really complicated system. But her doctor said to her, you're going to have to do something pretty extreme to lose the weight. Like really a tiny window of intermittent fasting, and she didn't offer Ozempic or one of those things. It was more just like, you're going to have to do something extreme. And then she left, and the patient was like, wait, what does that mean? Like, wait, what? Like, do I not eat? Like, I don't get it. What's the extreme thing? And the cutie has had over really kind of bad, had to have a hysterectomy, was only given estrogen patch. And at least she was given that. Some people are not even given estrogen after a hysterectomy. So, but she had a very complex thing happening with her thyroid and her adrenal glands. So if a woman is in stress mode, which many of us are, because of our jobs, our families, because of freaking life, then a lot of times the biochemical message is to hold and protect. Like, there's a resource coming in, we're going to hold on to it tight, and just it's going to go right to your belly, because that's, if you're under a high stress hormone influence, it's going to go straight to belly fat. So a lot of women, Kara and I see this all the time, where our patients give us diet diaries and they are not eating enough food.
No.
So
no,
for
it's starvation.
The message is obviously like, we're not going to give you a baby if you're not eating enough food or fat. Like, we can't do that, because we're just trying to preserve ourselves. Like, women who get babies, generally, there's a lot of other factors, obviously, but need to be what the body needs to feel at ease, and that their nutrition is not in question.
Right. It's
and
abundant.
For perimenopausal hormone changes, like, I'm still in perimenopause, like the body needs the same message. Like, we're not in danger. Everybody's okay. We're just going through some hormone shifts, and you're going to be good. And the more we can keep things steady, Eddie, even Steven, then you're going to have less symptoms.
Yes. And that touches on one of the big points, is that when we're talking to women about fertility, we're really focused on fats and getting more fats in their diet. But women, as we get older, might need a little bit less of that fat. So the research for symptoms of perimenopause and menopause, and the number one symptom is going to be hot flashes and night sweats, right? Number two is actually forgetfulness. So that's really important. Yeah, in perimenopause. So it's very interesting. Like, that is interesting symptom. Number 2 most common symptom is forgetfulness. I'm
It's
sure a
when
lot of
you
you are
walk
thinking
into
that.
a room and you can't remember why,
Yes.
or you're like, I know I put my keys there and but
Right.
they're not there. You know, that those, and women really freak out because they question their mental health, they
Right.
question their, and then a lot of that's driven by sleep change. So it's really interesting because the number one reported symptom of menopause, I would say, is hot flashes and night sweats, because that's what women are reporting. These studies are done by what women are reporting. But I
Mhm.
will tell you that the number one symptom clinically that I see in perimenopause, 1 and 2, are anxiety and sleep changes. And so those things potentiate the memory loss, right? Remember our sleep talk, and you're like, oh my God, if a woman's not sleeping well, how could she remember or feel like, it's that
Brain
ADD
depression.
brain that people start to feel like. So a lot of times by the time they're reporting the symptoms,
Mhm.
they've already missed what's happened to them the last 5 years. They've blown it off just as sleep issues, or they've blown it off as like, my life's just really busy with 2
Stress.
kids or 3 kids in my job, and I'm more anxious than I've been, but
Mhm.
it's just because things are so busy. And it's like, no, that's because your progesterone's waning. That's because you're going under hormone shifts that are subtle, not enough to change your periods, or some women changing their periods, but they're not connecting the dots.
Mhm. So it's really just the basic dietary advice of all the research on this period of hormone change. What we really want is tons of antioxidants, tons of brightly colored fruits and vegetables, more of a plant-based diet. That's what the research is. I'm kind of summarizing it all. And that's the same research that we go to for egg quality and anti-aging and protecting all your cells, protecting your cardiovascular system. So this is the typical sort of Mediterranean diet. This is the typical thing, right? Really high in fiber, really high in plant material, not really high in processed food and lots of sugar. And around the hormone changes that happen later in life, we want to think about, maybe I don't need as much fat as I used to need, because there is some kind of shift there that I'm seeing as a pattern in the research. But overall, what's really, really interesting is it's all about the fiber. Again, we just keep coming back to this gut health and fiber thing, and it really, really is a thing. Fiber has a lot to do with your hormone detox and your gut microbiome and your mood. And we just, as Americans, don't eat enough fiber. So looking at that is really important to do if you're not adding up your typical fiber and saying, how many grams am I having a day? Using one of these apps, just typing in, if you eat an apple, just type in how much fiber is in here and add it up. And if you're not getting it 45 grams, that's a really good goal for people to get at. And most people come in way under. So that's one piece of dietary advice. And then another one that's interesting is to look at, do you have to have as much protein as we are talking about with the younger women? So what do you think about that?
Yes. During perimenopause and menopause, 100% yes. And the reason why is because, and this is the thing where I think it gets really tricky for people when they hear plant-based diets
Mm-hmm.
and they're going more towards making vegan choices, is the blood sugar control.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the one piece that I think is really sticky, really maybe from research versus like clinical practice. And that I think where we make the most impressive, where we make the most impressive changes with our patients is, yes, 1, when we get them more fiber, 2, when we get them just more antioxidants, but 3, when we control their blood sugar. And we are taking off one of the stressors on our body that is a variable blood sugar. And that is something that we can 100% control. And as our hormones change, we just need different things. So a woman who before used to go for a long stretch or have some success with an intermittent fast all of a sudden you drop her estrogen and progesterone, and she can't handle that stressful event of the intermittent fast in the same way, triggers the stress hormones, puts weight on the belly. So she's doing the same thing than she was doing before and having results. And all of a sudden her results stop. And a lot of that's because her blood sugar is not regulated or stable, and it's triggering a stress response. The stress response is triggering bloating and weight preservation. Just hold all the resources. Don't metabolize as well, because we might not get food for a little while. If your body gets the memo biochemically that you might not get food for a little while, that you like might be in hibernation, it is going to hold all your resources to preserve your brain health down the line so that you can avoid predators. Like, it's just the way the setup is. So that's the one thing that clinically I think is a little different than what the research is all pushing. So I really feel like in the perimenopausal years, I think once you get into your full on menopause and you're in that menopause is a very steady hormone state in a sense, because you're just flatlined, and hopefully everybody that's a candidate's on hormone replacement therapy, like big, huge fan of hormone replacement therapy. Hopefully everybody who's a candidate is getting that, but that's a steady state of hormone because you've lost your underlying cycle underneath of estrogen and progesterone changes. But the perimenopause years, I think you need as much protein as a woman trying to get pregnant. I think what I've seen is women need as much fat. They just need to be aware of the fiber. And what I've noticed in my patients, our patients, is they're not eating enough food. And so like when food falls off for women, because they're not prioritizing these big kind of bodacious meals, like our women getting pregnant are insanely incredible about their diets. Like you ask a woman on a fertility journey and they're like eating all these vegetables and they're trying to really get their protein and they're really trying to max everything because they're trying so hard. I feel like what happens to a woman when she starts to have babies and she's breastfeeding and she's in her job and running, you're starting to run after kids. It's less of a priority. You're grabbing and going. You're like the energy isn't as much on the food. You've put on some weight. So you're in your mind just scaling back anyway, because you've been given the message that you should sort of like secretly starve yourself and exercise more, you know, and I feel like that happens over time. So by the time women come to get us and they're not sleeping well, they're anxious, they might have dry vaginal tissue or painful sex or bloating or memory changes. And we ask them what they're eating like 1,100 calories with barely any fiber.
Third. Yeah, I think if I had to summarize it, I would be focusing really on the fiber for this 40s and 50s perimenopause group and the type of fats. So when we're trying to get people pregnant, our hormones are made of fat. So we're just trying to make sure they have higher cholesterol numbers and things like we want them to have so much good quality fat in their lives. But we were joking, looking at the research right before we got on, right, Hillary? And it's interesting that there was some research on the perimenopausal group and their symptoms on mayonnaise, right? And the kind of frying like oils and those things made people have more hot flashes. Like that is a big deal. If those things
So
are
that's like canola, all the seed oil.
Those oils are
all
just
the seed oils, which I feel like women can tend towards having if they're snacking more or they're eating off of their kids' plates. Like I think a lot of women do the like clean up on aisle 9 and they're eating off their kids' plates. And if the kids are eating any packaged foods or foods with seed oils, like please remember that even if you're buying healthy brands at Whole Foods that are organic, they still can be loaded with safflower oil, canola oil. And that's like the mayonnaise group. There, it is hilarious. There's a group where they're like eating kind of like donuts and fried food and mayonnaise. So that's all the seed oil group. Those people do by far the worst hot flash wise.
Worst.
So
Because
getting
they're pro-inflammatory, right? It's all, this is all connected. It's a really big deal.
my dog just decided to wake up. Everybody's been awake for days or hours. Oh, hi.
Oh, just wants to go out. There was something you just said, though, that made me think of something kind of important. Oh, I think, and you and I talk about this all the time with our individual clients we work with, is that I think the place that these women are getting those seed oils is in their salad dressings, because we're making good choices, right? We want to have the salad. We know we want salad with a lean protein, and so we'll get that out. And then the salad dressings are disgusting. They really are. Even a good restaurant, a really good restaurant cuts the olive oil. I mean,
even down the street when we go get our fancy restaurant food that we love,
we use our own salad dressing that we make, because you can't, olive oil is quite expensive, because if you're eating this diet that we're promoting for you to eat, you're going through olive oil bottles all the time. You're always having to buy it at the grocery store. And it should be expensive. And you're thinking, oh, another bottle of olive oil, because you're using it all the time, right? You're supposed to be using this. But they cut it with they'll use grapeseed oil or some other seed oil just to make it thinner and go longer. And it's not okay. So getting rid of the salad dressings, carrying around your own salad dressing. At my work, I have my old, how your spice jars are glass, right? So I have my old spice jars, and I often will just mix the salad dressing in there before work and just keep it in the glass jar. And that's a really great travel jar. It's a really good size, right?
Yeah. Dr. Kara Burkhart.
I know. Pauline said it to me the other day, like, that's so smart to just use those jars, because they actually taste a little bit like my herbs. I'll just, I like that. And so that's the way to do it, some kind of glass container with your salad dressing, and you have it at your work, you have it somewhere close to your desk or wherever you're going to eat your salad. And when you go out, you ask for just olive oil and lemon juice or some kind of vinegar, maybe. And you're careful about how much of that oil you're going to use.
So to summarize, I know, look at Lucy is really wanting to.
She wants to go out. Well, we're done. We think it's really important as far as symptom control to be doing your diet, right, Lucy?
To be eating your fiber, to watch your stress hormones, to manage your blood sugar. It's so annoying. We know we're annoying. We are going to admit to being annoying, that everything is not just one thing.
It's never one thing.
It's so unfortunate that we can't give you one answer. Mm-mm. And I know that sometimes my patients are like, oh my God, but the truth is that it's a complicated matrix. Like, we are a complicated bundle of cells and bacteria. There's not one way to make it through hormone balance, but increasing your fiber, managing your blood sugar, getting enough protein, getting the right fats, and not too little, not too much, not too little food, not too much. These are all really important for hormone balance. But keep hanging out. We'll keep giving you little nuggets.
We're coming back with more on the perimenopausal stuff. Bye.
Bye.